In the afternoon of the 26th of December 1944, a column of American Sherman tanks from the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armoured Division, raced northward on a forested road towards the Belgian town of Bastogne. After overrunning a German bunker, the tanks came across a clearing littered with parachutes. The column's commander, Captain William Dwight, recognised these parachutes as being from supply drops and ordered his Sherman, nicknamed Cobra King, to slow down. With daylight fading, a single officer approached Dwight's tank and called out, "I'm Lieutenant Webster, 326th Airborne Engineers. Glad to see you guys." The 37th Tank Battalion's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, soon arrived to shake hands with Brigadier General Antony McAuliffe, the acting commander of the 101st Airborne Division. This marks the end of the siege of Bastogne, one of the most important towns in the Ardennes region, and a key objective of the December 1944 German winter offensive, which came to be known as the Battle of the Bulge. The week-long siege saw the 101st Airborne, along with Combat Command B of the 10th Armoured Division and the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, hold the strategic crossroads in the face of heavy enemy attacks. The siege has become part of American military lore, especially the role of the 101st Airborne in defeating German attempts to take the town. The division's actions in Bastogne made the headlines of every major newspaper in the United States, which earned the men of the 101st enduring fame. However, in Stephen Ambrose's book Band of Brothers, he wrote, "As the story of the Battle of the Bulge is told today, it is one of George Patton and his Third Army coming to the rescue of the encircled 101st, like the cavalry come to save the settlers in their wagon circle. No member of the 101st has ever agreed that the division needed to be rescued. Indeed, the paratroopers never felt the Germans could ever take the town while they defended it. But why did they believe that they didn't need to be relieved, despite being completely surrounded? The main reason was their strong defensive position. When the Battle of Bastogne began, the German forces surrounding the town initially outnumbered the trapped American units 5-1. However, the panzer divisions which were spearheading the German advance were quickly ordered to bypass the crossroads and continue towards the Meuse River. The need to keep the offensive moving west siphoned off troops from the siege, which meant the German forces could never muster enough strength to seize Bastogne in a direct assault. By the time Bastogne was relieved, the men trapped in the town actually outnumbered the Germans surrounding them. In fact, the German commander of the besieging forces, Major General Heinz Kochot, was concerned that his men would not be able to stop the Americans if they attempted to break out of the pocket. Knowing the strategic crossroads needed to be taken as soon as possible, the commander of the 48th Panzer Corps, General Heinrich von Luttwitz, hoped to bluff the defenders into surrendering without the need to assault the town. He sent an envoy to demand the surrender of the Americans trapped in Bastogne, or they would face annihilation by artillery fire. The German commander received a short reply from General McAuliffe, "Nuts." While the defiant response raised morale within the pocket, Luttwitz's superior officer, General Hasso von Manteuffel, was furious with his subordinate. Manteuffel knew that they did not have enough artillery nor the ammunition to follow through on the threat. When the promised hail of heavy shells did not come, the American leadership within Bastogne felt they had called the Germans bluff. Kochot's men attempted to storm Bastogne on many occasions with little success. Beginning on the 22nd of December, German forces launched several concentric attacks on the defensive perimeter, hoping to find a weak spot in the American lines. Despite a growing shortage of artillery shells, the paratroopers within the pocket were able to concentrate their fire on the most threatened sectors with great effect. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division lost 400 men in one attack on the 22nd of December, forcing Kochot to pull back and reassess. In fact, the Germans never amassed enough strength to seriously threaten the defenders, and although some attacks almost broke into the town, Bastogne remained in American hands by the end of the battle. The 101st Airborne was not alone in their defence of Bastogne, as the contribution of the 10th Armoured Division's Combat Command B and the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion cannot be understated. Both units played a critical role in defending the perimeter against German attacks, as the tanks of the 10th Armoured along with the 705th's anti-tank guns broke up enemy armoured assaults. In combination with the 101st and the artillery battalions in the pocket, the units defending Bastogne worked in concert to hold the line. Historian Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams asserts, the defenders had perfected their combined arms defensive tactics, whereas the Volksgrenadiers and Panzers rarely played to each other's strengths, and their combat efforts were clumsy by comparison. The 101st's reputation as an elite fighting unit reassured many who would otherwise be concerned by the encirclement. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, recalled after the war, "I was never worried. We had at Bastogne our best division. When the commander said they were okay, I believed he would hold." In fact, Brigadier General McAuliffe and his clean-shaven staff waited for Lieutenant Colonel Abrams just behind the front line on the 26th of December in their parade dress, just to give the impression that they had the situation well under control. Although there was a major shortage of artillery shells and fuel, Bastogne was well provisioned with food before the siege began, which meant the Americans trapped in the pocket were not in danger of starving. In order to stay in fighting condition, the men on the front quickly exhausted their K rations within the first 3 days, but were able to use a large supply of flour to make simple hot cakes. They were almost certainly better fed than their opponents, as the German troops surrounding the paratroopers often had to share one loaf of bread amongst 10 men. The paratroopers were optimistic. Unaware that they had been cut off, Corporal Gordon Carson asked a medic why none of the wounded were being evacuated. "Haven't you heard?" the medic replied. "They've got us surrounded, the poor bastards." Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard later said, "We never felt we would be overrun. We were beating back everything they threw at us. We had the houses and were warm. They were outside the town in the snow and cold." Despite the general sense of optimism, not all of the men on the ground shared the Lieutenant Colonel's experience of the siege. Upon hearing of Kinnard's comments, one paratrooper responded incredulously, "What battle was he in?" Despite their bravado, many members of the 101st would later admit they privately doubted whether they could endure their hardship. The urge to shoot oneself in the foot or hand in order to be sent back to an aid station weighed heavily on many men. One paratrooper purposefully took his boots off at night to get frostbite, but most steeled their nerves and remained on the front. This obviously did not mean that they were pleased to be in this situation. The then Captain Winters later remarked, "When a man was hit hard enough to be taken off the line back to the town, he was usually very happy, and we were happy for him. He had a ticket to the hospital, or even a ticket home, alive. When a man was killed, he looked so peaceful, his suffering was over." Yet, once wounded men arrived at the hospital, they discovered that most of the 101st Airborne's medical supplies had been captured by the German forces on the outskirts of the town. There was also a dire lack of medics and doctors who could take care of the wounded. 2 Bastogne women, Renée Lemaire and Augusta Chewy, volunteered as nurses to take the burden off the overwhelmed combat medics. Frostbite was the biggest danger for the men who did not have proper winter equipment. A store of potato sacks in Bastogne was distributed to the men to wear on their feet, but casualties from frostbite and trenchfoot continued to rise. The frigid temperatures and constant harassing fire from the German forces threatened to push many men to the breaking point. The siege had effectively failed on the 23rd of December, when the low clouds and fog over the Ardennes finally gave way to crystal clear skies. Waves of C-47 transports dropped 334 tons of supplies to the surrounded defenders, which allowed them to keep fighting indefinitely. The good weather also heralded the return of Allied air supremacy, as RAF and USAAF fighter bombers raked the German positions surrounding Bastogne. With no hope of seizing the town in a direct assault, and with General George Patton's Third Army attacking from the south, the German units were forced into an impossible situation. Patton's tanks finally broke through to the defenders on the 26th of December, officially ending the siege of Bastogne.